It's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. Addressing CEOs of public institutions, President Park Geun-hye asked them to lead the way as reform in the public sector will set the tone for changes in the private sector. Seoul prosecutors conduct a second raid on Lotte Group, retrieving more evidence that could help expose the conglomerate's shady government structure. Messages of condolences for the victims and families of the Orlando shooting pour in from all corners of the globe, including Korea. Over in the U.S., that tragedy is reshaping the campaigns of the two leading presidential candidates. Meeting CEOs of public institutions at a special workshop, President Park Geun-hye called on them to lead reforms in finance, labor, and education as restructuring efforts must go on and cannot be postponed in order to counter outstanding challenges in and out of the country. Song Ji-sun starts us off with the president's message.
President Park Geun-hye says Korea is facing a very difficult time in which the country must overcome uncertainties both at home and abroad, making it harder for the economy to take another leap forward. At a meeting Tuesday with the CEOs of public institutions, President Park stressed the public sector is key to leading reforms in finance, labor, and education.
경제의 체질을 개선하고 그 성과를 국민들께서 체감할 수 있도록 만들어야 합니다. 그 가운데에서도 공공개혁은 민간 부문의 변화를 유도하는 개혁의 출발점으로 그 책임이 막중합니다.
Since taking office in 2013, President Park has pushed to normalize public institutions by focusing on reducing their debts, which started dropping for the first time in 2014. 120 public agencies have adopted performance-based salaries this year, in addition to adopting a wage peak system last year, aimed at giving more jobs to young people by allowing older employees to stay in their jobs if they take a pay cut. President Park also said employment rewards must be based on performance and not on seniority, and that reforms must continue despite all the potential obstacles.
앞으로 개혁을 중단 없이 추진해서 우리 경제의 재도약과 미래 세대의 일자리 창출을 위한 중추가 되어주기를 바랍니다.
President Park stressed that reforms are not something that can be postponed and that failure is not an option. She added that job creation must grow out of the creative economy through a convergence of the public and private sectors. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Moving over to the National Assembly, where President Park's chief of staff made his second visit in a week for meetings with party leaders. According to our Kim Young-gil, it's all part of efforts to improve cooperation between the government and legislature.
Presidential Chief of Staff Lee Won-jong visited the Assembly for a second time in a week on Tuesday to meet with the heads of all three political parties. He was accompanied by the Senior Presidential Secretary for Political Affairs, Kim Jae-won. At the meeting with the ruling Saenuri Party, the floor leader vowed to improve relations with the presidential office.
Let's make a strong team between the ruling party and the presidential office.
In response, Lee promised to cooperate with the ruling party to manage state affairs and said the people's happiness can come from legislating good livelihood bills. He also asked the main opposition Minju Party of Korea to give its full support to the smooth operation of parliamentary affairs. The party has a majority in parliament following an election in April and as such holds the Assembly Speaker's seat.
If the Minju Party can help us with an open mind, then I believe the 20th National Assembly can set a good example of cooperation.
Minju Party floor leader Woo Sang-ho said the party understands its responsibility to help manage state affairs, but also called on the presidential office to respect the decisions made by the legislative branch. In their meeting, the co-leaders of the minor opposition People's Party emphasized the president's role in leading politics.
The president and the presidential office must lead the way. We are more than willing to cooperate, and we will do our best too. The president is at the forefront of politics.
Co-leader An Cheol-soo also mentioned his expectations for improved relations between parliament and the presidential office, following President Park's promise for stronger cooperation during her speech to parliament on Monday. With the 20th National Assembly now in full swing, the leaders of the three parties will brief the parliament on their policy perspectives and party platforms starting next week. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Some rude awakening for South Korea's national defense. North Korea may own up to 50 nuclear weapons by 2020. The scenario and other concerning projections of the regime's nuclear capability as well as ways to restrain it have been discussed between South Korean and U.S. experts in Seoul. For details, let's turn to our Kwon So-wa.
Time is on North Korea's side, not South Korea's. That's how experts see the situation when it comes to Pyongyang's nuclear weapons development, saying the regime seems to be making its way around whatever sanctions or isolation it faces. South Korean and U.S. specialists gathered at the International Conference on the Korea and U.S. Nuclear Policy Tuesday, hosted by the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. There, they debated how far Pyongyang could go with its nuclear program.
In a worst-case scenario, by 2020, North Korea could have possibly up to 50 nuclear weapons, both plutonium and uranium weapons, as well as more advanced delivery systems and more delivery system options as well.
Town is also the managing editor and producer of 38 North, a website on North Korea issues. She adds, currently, there are no clear signs of a nuclear test.
There has been some activity, a lot of it's very low-level activity as far as we can tell. It could be anything from maintenance to, obviously continued tunneling, but there's nothing that says specifically that there's any imminent threat.
Experts point out that South Korea's single 5-year presidential term, or 1 or 2 U.S. terms, versus Kim Jong-un's lifetime term as North Korea's leader makes it more difficult for Seoul and Washington to maintain tangible policies.
The right mix of the diplomacy, pressure, and deterrence. So currently, I think we are mainly based on this firm deterrence posture. And then based on the firm deterrence capability, actually we can pursue both pressure and the diplomacy.
Although experts agree that's easier said than done, momentum is building as more countries join effective implementation of sanctions that could at least slow North Korea's ambitions. Kwon So-wa, Arirang News.
Speaking of defending its interests, it seems South Korean military will have to continue the crackdown on illegal Chinese fishing boats. On Tuesday, several Chinese vessels crossed back into the Hangang River estuary. Military sources say a small number of Chinese boats resumed fishing before the crack of dawn. Thankfully, after the patrol restarted, they soon fled north of the border. The estuary is the mouth of the Hangang River that flows through Seoul and its neutral waters bordering the two Koreas. Last week, the South Korean military and UN command forces launched their first crackdown in the area since the 1953 Korean War Armistice Agreement. Prosecutors are leaving no stone unturned as they continue the investigation into one of Korea's top 5 conglomerates. On Tuesday, additional raids were carried out on Lotte Group. Kim Min-ji has more on the investigation or the probe of the business giant's suspected slush funds.
The investigation into the country's 5th largest conglomerate is forging ahead. Prosecutors launched a second raid on Lotte Group on Tuesday, searching 10 business units including Lotte Engineering and Construction and Lotte Chemical, as well as 5 other locations. Prosecutors say they confiscated account books and documents on land transactions and financial deals among the companies. They believe these firms could be connected to a slush fund created during mergers between Hotel Lotte and 2 of the group's resorts. Prosecutors are also looking into whether Shin Gyok-ho, the founder of Lotte Group, sold his land to the group's business units at higher prices to create slush funds. Recent data shows that Lotte units have purchased 11 pieces of land from the founder since 2000, with the deals reaching roughly $55 million. The latest move follows a raid of the group's headquarters and 6 of its units on Friday as part of a widening probe into the slush fund allegations, as well as claims the group stockpiled wealth through internal trading among its business arms. The probe has also triggered negative sentiment, giving Lotte Group a torrid time on the local stock market. Lotte's business units extended their losses on Tuesday, with Lotte Confectionery shedding over 2.5% and Lotte Choesang falling almost 4%. So far in the month of June, Lotte Group's combined market capitalization has shrunk by over $1.8 billion. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Korean government is celebrating the start of a new mentoring program that connects domestic venture firms and leading global companies. The program could help the nation's creative economy initiative and raise the global competitiveness of local startups. Kim Ji-yeon gives us an introduction.
The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning outlined its new startup mentoring program Tuesday for local startups and leading U.S. tech companies in Korea. Under the program, 14 local startups that are seeking to advance into the U.S. market are selected based on recommendations from the KICT Born to Global Startup Center or from one of the Korea's 17 creative economy and innovation centers. The selected startups will each be mentored by one of the 19 globally recognized members of AMTAM, the American Chamber of Commerce in Korea, such as Facebook, Microsoft, and IBM, according to the field the startup is in. AMTAM President John Schultz says he hopes a synergy effect can be brought about through this mentoring program due to the increased cooperation among the U.S. and Korean companies. In response, the Science Ministry's second Vice Minister, Choi Jae-woo, said the government will continue to increase its support for the program so that local startups can become more competitive on the global stage. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Korea's national wealth stood at roughly $10 trillion as of the end of last year. A huge chunk of that was land and construction assets like real estate. Let's take a deeper look at the numbers and beyond with our Hwang Ji-hye.
Korea's national wealth was nearly 8 times larger than the nation's gross domestic product as of the end of last year. The Bank of Korea says the amount was roughly $10 trillion, up around 6% from a year earlier. This includes tangible assets like real estate and automobiles as well as financial assets. Real estate, including land and buildings, took up almost 90% of the total sum.
The rate of increase for real estate assets shrank significantly after the global financial crisis, but it has picked up pace since 2014 thanks to government urban development projects in Sejong City and Jeju Island.
When dividing the total wealth by household, the data shows that each household calculated as containing 2.5 people holds roughly $300,000. From that, non-financial assets again take up a huge chunk of around 63% of the total assets, although that has been on a downward trend since 2008. And the figure is still far higher compared to other nations like the United States, Japan, and Canada. Pundits urge people to diversify their assets to avert the kind of risk that could come from a sudden and drastic drop in real estate prices. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Key defense and security professionals are in Paris for the world's largest defense exhibition to find the right weapon systems for their countries and make industry connections. Korea will be represented by its biggest contingent ever. Kim Yeon-bin has this report.
The world's largest international land and air defense and security exhibition, Eurosatory, kicked off on Monday on the outskirts of Paris. The biannual exhibition, now in its 25th year, features over 1,600 defense exhibitors from 70 countries, including Korea. Seoul is seeking to increase its overseas defense sales there this year and in the years to come.
In the past 3 years, our defense industry has made over $3 billion in overseas sales, becoming a key industry in our economy. We will help our local defense companies expand their exports in the years to come.
Just 16 Korean defense companies took part in the last Eurosatory 2 years ago. But this year, 21 Korean companies are grinding it out among the world's best to sell their goods. Hana Taekwon showed off his signature K9 self-propelled artillery piece, which has a range of 40 kilometers and is able to fire 6 rounds per minute. The weapon has been ready for combat since 2000 and has brought in $1 billion in overseas sales since hitting the market the year before. Korea Aerospace Industries showcased new and upgraded models of its Suryeon aircraft, the very first Korean-made helicopter. Fierce competition is expected at this year's Eurosatory, as China, Japan, India, and other countries are exhibiting their latest defense weaponry alongside defense powerhouses, the U.S. and Europe. The event continues through Friday. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The fatal Orlando nightclub shooting is having an impact in the race for the White House. Leading U.S. presidential candidates quickly condemned the massacre in their own way. Kim Jong-soo shed light on how differently the two camps are reacting and building on the tragic incident.
The tragic shooting in Orlando is propelling the issues of terrorism and gun control to the forefront of the U.S. presidential election. Republican candidate Donald Trump on Monday renewed his call for a temporary ban on Muslim immigrants.
Our nation stands together in solidarity with the members of Orlando's LGBT community. We must find out what is going on. We have to do it. It will be lifted, this ban, when and as a nation we're in a position to properly and perfectly screen these people coming into our country. They're pouring in, and we don't know what we're doing.
Hillary Clinton also responded to the tragedy, calling for closer cooperation with U.S. allies and improvements to domestic law enforcement to prevent terrorist acts on U.S. soil, as well as a better technological system to prevent the spread of Islamic State propaganda.
As president, I will work with our great tech companies from Silicon Valley to Boston to step up our game. We have to do a better job intercepting ISIS's communications, tracking and analyzing social media posts, and mapping jihadist networks, as well as promoting credible voices who can provide alternatives to radicalization.
Trump criticized Clinton for her part in the Obama administration's immigration policy, which he said was responsible for the killings in San Bernardino last year and Orlando. He said that under Clinton's plan, the U.S. will be, quote, admitting hundreds of thousands of refugees from the Middle East with no system to prevent them, or to prevent the radicalization of the children and their children. Clinton characterized Trump's Muslim ban as wrong and dangerous, saying it, quote, plays right into the terrorist hands. While both candidates have addressed the need for improvements to counterterrorism policy, citizens have once again begun to call for stronger gun control laws. So far, Trump has rejected the idea of tight restrictions on gun purchases, while Clinton has argued for a ban on semi-automatic weapons and tighter controls for people on terrorism watch lists. Kim Jong-soo, Arirang News.
That's all from us for now. Thank you for watching.